Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Tip of the Ice-Burgh podcast, brought to you as always by InsideThePenguins.com, a proud affiliate of the Hockey News. I'm your host, Nick Brlansky, joined as always by Nick Horwat, and the Penguins have returned from the All-Star break, plus their bye week. It's been a while since they've had a game, but later tonight they take on the Winnipeg Jets, who are among the top teams in the Western Conference, one of only two teams the Penguins have yet to face this season. Plenty of storylines heading into that one, as we'll discuss in a little bit. But we also have to talk about some of the roster changes and lineup changes that we've seen over the last couple of days at Penguins practice. It looks like it's going to be a fresh look on the ice for the Penguins as they go to PPG Paints Arena later this evening. But also, we're joined by Jesse Marshall of The Athletic in a little bit to break down the Penguins' dysfunctional power play, talk a little bit about Erik Karlsson, his thoughts on Carlson through 46 games with the Penguins, and an interesting anecdote about Ryan Graves and why you should probably stop trying to have your hopes up about him becoming the next Paul Martin in Pittsburgh. But we have a lot to discuss on this episode, Horwat, starting obviously with what you saw on Sunday as the Penguins got back together at UPMC Lemieux Sports Complex. A lot of injured players back for the Penguins. Seemingly Riley Smith and John Ludwig will be available later this evening for the Pens.
Yeah, Mike Sullivan labeled both of them as game time decisions, a call usually not made that far in advance, but when you're coming off of your bye week and the All-Star break, Riley Smith really was never taken off of the active roster. He kind of just was scratched for those games. And John Ludwig, while was on LTIR, got in his second stint in the AHL for rehabilitation, and the word has escaped me, conditioning for his conditioning stint. All signs kind of pointed to they're both going to be okay. I mean, Riley Smith was back in his normal spot on the second line with Evgeny Malkin and Drew O'Connor. For the first practice, at least, John Ludwig was there playing with Chav Ruedel, although yesterday was on the fourth pair, if you will, with Colin White. So we'll see how the defensemen shape out. That exactly probably won't be known until we see the announcement that he's off of LTIR about an hour or two before game time. So we'll see where the Ludwig thing goes, but I'd expect Riley Smith to be put right back into the lineup.
Yeah, he's been practicing on the second line with Evgeny Malkin, and if you remember, before he was injured, he was bumped down to the third line with Lars Zeller and Valtteri Puustinen. So Riley Smith coming back into the lineup, they're hoping that he has a jolt similar to what Rickard Rakell did when he came back from injury earlier this season. You just need him to find that chemistry that he had with Evgeny Malkin earlier in the season, and it looks like it's going to be Riley Smith, Evgeny Malkin, and Drew O'Connor. What do you think about them immediately putting him back in the top six? This vote of confidence for Riley Smith, a veteran in this league that has shown consistency in the past, but just hasn't been able to find his footing in Pittsburgh.
I don't totally hate it. It's kind of exactly where he should go if he's really going to get his confidence back and gain that step that he needs. They really are just hoping for that Rickard Rakell effect almost, where it is that long you're struggling, an injury happens. And then after some time off, some rest, and you're watching the game for a little bit, you get back in there, and maybe you don't score right away like Rakell didn't, but maybe a few goals come in, maybe a few assists pop in down the line a little bit. Penguins have a big week coming up this week with 3 games in the next 5 days. And those are all going to be huge, important games that if he's able to, they're against West Coast teams, but if Riley Smith is able to kind of find some footing and produce along with Malkin and Drew O'Connor, it should be exactly where it needs to be, and they're looking for that Rickard Rakell effect almost.
Yeah, you can't have $5 million players that are struggling to score. I mean, he had 2 goals in his previous 30 games before the injury, so you're hoping that Riley Smith can bounce back. The only big difference for me is we don't know how long Rickard Rakell was dealing with an injury before he officially went on the shelf. Now, he could have just gotten injured in that last game before he left the lineup and before he went on LTIR. That's possible, but there was something that seemed off about Rickard Rakell just in general in his play in the last couple of games before heading over to LTIR. Whereas Riley Smith, it was clear and obvious when he got injured, what the injury was, and it wasn't something that had affected him the previous handful of games. So that was just his play, and that was just what was happening for Riley Smith when it comes to his performance. So you're hoping that he bounces back, that he's able to reset mentally and reset physically now with that upper body injury and come back and be a very big contributor for the Penguins. And you mentioned that, yes, these 3 games in 5 days, the Penguins do have 2 days off after this one tonight, but these 3 games in 5 days, while yes, they're against the Western Conference, you got a month until the NHL trade deadline. You have to start winning these games. You have to start making up ground in the Eastern Conference if you want to be a contender by that pivotal date of March 8th, whenever Kyle Dubas has to make a decision. There's no more times to make a decision. There's no more runway that he can push back to once you get to March 8th. It's, are you selling some players off? Are you buying? There's no in between at that point. So it's interesting that Riley Smith finds himself with 1 month until the deadline back in the top 6, and he couldn't go back into the bottom 6 because there's another struggling top 6 winger that's down there in Rickard Rakell. He's been down there for a couple of games, obviously gets the All-Star break, playing alongside Lars Eller, but now joined by somebody else on the right side. We'll see the Penguins debut tonight, or at least expected to see the Penguins debut tonight, of one Jesse Puljujarvi. Signs a 2-year contract over the weekend, $800,000 cap hit per season. Dubas had seen enough of Puljujarvi at the AHL level. 9 points, 4 goals, 5 assists in 13 games with Wilkes-Barre Scranton before inking his deal. A 2-year deal was something that makes sense, I would say, but something that I don't think either of us had really mentioned when talking about the Puljujarvi discussion.
No, I like it. I do like it a lot. But I think because it feels, or at least for now, it still kind of feels like a reclamation almost, where he is just sort of coming in to prove he can still cut it in the NHL. Maybe we were all sort of expecting it to just be this tryout year, or this tryout final, however many games we have left. That's sort of just what it felt like it was going to be. He's just going to come in. He's working his way back from double hip surgery. Still unclear exactly what the hip surgery was. I have not gone back to find the initial news reports. I just keep seeing both sorts of surgeries, but regardless, I'm just calling it hip surgery. Seeing him come back from that, it felt like this was supposed to just kind of be just a tryout period. Again, past an actual tryout, but an actual NHL game time where rolling through to see what he can bring tryout. But with it being an extra year, there's stability there. There's confidence, A, from the front office, but also B, in the player, that he can not only perform this year, believe it's a one-way, but then into next year, be that useful, bottom 6 option that might be able to slide into the top if you need it. He's got that confidence in him, and there's some stability there. You don't have to worry about immediately going into this offseason with, okay, what do we do now? That was a good 30 games or so, or however many it is. Now what do we do? So that's sort of off the table.
Yeah, Kyle Dubas has done a good job, I feel like, trying to give himself some options when it comes to the bottom 6. He's gone out, obviously, and signed a handful of bottom 6 players throughout this season. We've seen Colin White get some time. We've seen Vinny Hinostroza get some time. Obviously, Jansen Harkins was brought in. He's gotten some time. He's on an expiring deal. But I think the big thing that you look at is that $800,000. With Jesse Puljujarvi getting that deal, you also have to look at somebody like Drew O'Connor, who's playing for $925,000. That's something the Penguins haven't had a lot of in recent years, is players that can contribute for less than $1 million. And when you have so many players, especially on the forward side, that are making not just, hey, Jeff Carter's making whatever it is, 3.25. Yeah, that's not good. You certainly don't want that in the 4 spot, but it's Riley Smith making $5 million. It's Rickard Rakell making $5 million. It's Brian Rust making $5 million. It's Jake Guentzel making $6 million. While yes, some of those players are contributing, and in Jake Guentzel's case, contributing at a high rate, that's a lot of players to have in that middle ground. And if they're not all contributing, which we've seen at points this season from both Rickard Rakell and Riley Smith at a very vast number, that's when you have to really rely on these guys making $750 league minimum, or $800,000, or $925 in Drew O'Connor's case. So your hope is Jesse Puljujarvi comes in and he becomes that, no doubt, stays in the lineup, top 9 type of forward that could bounce up and down at that $800,000 cap hit. It could be a very big deal for next year. I like adding that second year because it's still very, very low risk. At the end of the day, if he comes back and doesn't seem to be ready or doesn't seem to be the same that he was before the hip surgeries, then it's only $800,000. You can throw him on waivers. You can send him through waivers, or somebody might claim him. It's not that much money to where you're backing yourself in the corner. It's a maneuverable contract, and I like the fact that Kyle Dubas added this. Now, again, he hasn't played a single game at the NHL level with the Pittsburgh Penguins. How does this look in 3 months from now? That's a different question. But at $800,000, the risk is very low, and I like the fact that he tacked that other year on to give himself an option for a good depth piece. That's still the ceiling for Jesse Puljujarvi, and that's been a problem for the Penguins of the past couple seasons, is getting depth pieces consistently playing well in the bottom six.
Yeah, all those fun lines that we drew up a few weeks ago. I mean, not only could they happen this year, but now with maybe a little more turnover happening in the offseason, who knows exactly what the summer 2024 has to hold for the Penguins. But those weird, goofy lines we were coming up with now can be a possibility even into next year. So maybe the discussion of a Poulin centering Puljujarvi and Puustinen, as goofy as that sounds, that's something that maybe we see next year. Maybe it's an option down the line this year, probably not likely. So maybe there's something that can come from that next year. There's just plenty of stability to be had with Jesse Puljujarvi here for the extra year, and it's something that is well deserved for him. I'm not sure how many teams had their eyes on him before the Penguins brought him in, but this is going to be a good situation for the Penguins and the player.
Now, he does take Valtteri Puustinen's spot. You mentioned Puustinen there. That's essentially what he did. He comes up, he plays in exactly that role. Puustinen was sent down before the NHL's All-Star break and before the bye week to get a little bit more seasoning, to get some more games in. And I had thought, okay, they're setting him down just to get games. They're going to bring him back up after. Well, with Riley Smith being healthy and with, Jesse Puljujarvi being signed to the contract, there's no more space on the roster. Now, people are going to say something about Colin White. Colin White is going to be the 13th forward. You want Puustinen playing. If he's not going to be in the lineup, you want him down at the AHL level playing. So you see Puustinen get sent down. What have you thought of his first stint at the NHL level this season? His first real stint at the NHL of his career. 21 games, which is more than I had thought in the back of my head. 8 points, 1 goal, 7 assists, but only 1 assist in his last 11 games. What did you think of Valtteri Puustinen before getting sent down and now probably getting some more time in the AHL this season?
I would say it was fine. I can't go any higher than that. It was just fine. He looked really good at first with that initial jump, but things cooled off exponentially, really. I mean, he was taken off of, I believe it was both power plays for a little bit there. Eventually put back onto the first in that reshuffling, but it was just fine. He got that 1 goal in, and it sucks to say it, but it was kind of a garbage time goal. You were already blowing out the Islanders. If anything else, it was a very talented goal. It was a good goal scorer's goal that he definitely needed to get under his belt. But with that being the main highlight so far, it's not much coming from it. The confidence, I don't want to say the confidence seemed to dip toward the end of the run there, but something sort of evaporated and the game sort of slowed down. His ice time was getting cut down quite a bit, and then like I said, that reshuffling of the power play lines gave him another opportunity, but just a matter of getting that footing from the first 10 games or so that he had and maintaining that. That's what he has to do. And he just, I don't want to say he just couldn't, but he couldn't. It's the way it is. And Mike Sullivan, I forget when it was asked and when he answered it and how long ago this was now, but he put it nicely in saying that when guys get called up, the first handful of games or so, there's still that drive, that adrenaline rush almost. And then once that fades, that's when you really learn who a player is. You just hope they don't, fade too much. Yeah. And it just seemed like in this situation, Puustinen just faded just a bit too much for Sullivan's liking.
Now, here's the thing. I don't think he lost it just simply because he wasn't performing well. I think he lost it because there was a guy in Jesse Puljujarvi who was performing very well at the AHL level, and a guy in Jesse Puljujarvi who also has a lot of NHL experience and has performed well at the NHL level in his past. Whereas Puustinen, he's very young still. Like this is his first cup of coffee at the National Hockey League level. But like you mentioned, it's exactly what we see every single year from Zah Horna. It is that first adrenaline rush of, hey, I'm back at the NHL level. I'm trying to make a name for myself. I'm trying to stick. He gets that first couple of games, handful of games, maybe up to 10 games where he looks really good. There was a time this season where both me and you were saying, man, Zah Horna is an everyday NHLer now. Like, what a find.
Mm-hmm.
And then he dropped off drastically. Now, here's the difference between a guy in Zah Horna and a guy in Valtteri Puustinen, outside of the obvious, which is the age. The floor for Puustinen was so much higher than the floor for Zah Horna in his performance. Even towards the tail end of this 21-game stretch where he had 1 assist in 11 games, I think you could tell that the floor as far as performance was much, much higher. And the ceiling is obviously much higher because he's still a prospect. He's still a young player in this league. He has a lot of talent, especially offensive talent. I wouldn't be surprised if you saw Valtteri Puustinen again. The only issue is going to be the Penguins are now healthy with the exception of Matt Nieto.
Yeah.
It's going to take somebody either getting injured or getting traded away for Valtteri Puustinen to get another shot. I don't see very many spots in this lineup where somebody performs poorly and gets taken out completely for Valtteri Puustinen. Harkins is what he is, but Puustinen's never going to play on the fourth line. He's just not.
Yeah.
Achari's not going to get taken out of the lineup. Carter's not going to get taken out of the lineup. Even if a guy in Jesse Puljujarvi doesn't look good, he's going to get an extended look because they're going to be patient with this guy. They've been patient with him for the 2 months that he's been with the organization. PTO at the NHL level, PTO at the AHL level. They've been patient because they see something in him. I'd like to see Puustinen get another shot. I think he will get one other shot this season, but I think he's played himself into a spot where he can earn an everyday shot next year. And that's a huge thing for a kid who's, I believe, still 24 years of age and a kid that has tremendous offensive upside. So I'm excited to see where he goes from here. But you were right. He did dip. His ability, his performance did dip, and his ice time fluctuated because of that. He's not a 200-foot player, at least not to the level that Mike Sullivan would want. So that's why you see him, get this short end of the stick and gets to be the one that gets sent back in favor of a red-hot Jesse Puljujarvi.
Next training camp could be really interesting, too.
It should be.
With a player like Puustinen getting a much longer extended look, maybe with a guy like Sam Poulin also being there, maybe who knows what happens for the rest of the season. Maybe Sam Poulin's looking to continue a stretch in the NHL at that point. There's still a lot of stones to be overturned here. And just, you're right, Puljujarvi just comes into the Penguins organization with a longer and, I don't want to say higher ceiling, but likely a higher ceiling with NHL pedigree. Obviously, a former 4th overall pick as opposed to Puustinen being a 7th.
Rounder.
Yeah. It's where you're correct. Thank you for defining that one. I slipped that. But yeah, there's obviously a little bit more of a intrigue for Puljujarvi, whereas Puustinen, the expectations aren't super high, but also the ceiling already exceeds the expectations, so we know that there's a lot that can be had there. Just for the moment, I mean, the Penguins are in a spot of they need someone that can. And they need players that can help produce now and help win games now. They're still looking for a playoff spot. There's still games out. They're lucky to have an oh my god amount of games in hand. By the way,
yeah.
So all of the cards are in their favor. They just need to take advantage of those games in hand because that's something that they struggled with a lot last year, and that's something that so far they've struggled with this year. Yeah. So if they can get more of the sure shot into the lineup, they will, and that's exactly what Puljujarvi is, and that is not a knock against Puustinen. It's just they need that. They need that more of a guaranteed.
Yeah, at the end of the day, Valtteri Puustinen's a goal scorer that had 1 goal in 21 games. So you're going to bring in a new face, a fresh look for Jesse Puljujarvi. Not only that, I think the one thing that you have to notice is look where both these guys were deployed. Look at what spot he took over. It's the bottom 6. What have we been saying all season long? The Penguins' bottom 6 is defense first. Yes, they want to score more goals, but defense is the primary concern of the bottom 6. Jesse Puljujarvi is a much better 200-foot player, much better defensive player than Valtteri Puustinen is at this stage of their careers. So they go for Puljujarvi in this instance. Who knows how long this experiment lasts? I'm excited to see what he looks like at the NHL level, but I'm excited for tonight's game simply because there's a lot. And when I say a lot, I mean a crap ton of storylines heading into this Winnipeg Jets Pittsburgh Penguins matchup. The Penguins are somehow favorites, and I understand the Jets are losers of, I believe it's 3 straight games going into the All-Star break, but that's going into the All-Star break. I don't think you can take red hot team versus, ice cold team into effect when both teams have had like 8 days off. Not to mention the fact the Winnipeg Jets are one of the better teams in the Western Conference. They get Shawn Monahan during the All-Star break, so he will be potentially making his Winnipeg Jets debut. On the Penguins side, there's even more storylines we already talked about. Jesse Puljujarvi returning to NHL action potentially tonight, but Jake Guentzel set to play in his 500th career game. It'll be nice to see some discourse around him that's not involving his contract or trade talks, but 500th NHL game for Jake Guentzel tonight. 800th NHL game as a coach for Mike Sullivan. That's combined between his short period of time in Boston and obviously his very long period of time with the Penguins. He is now the second longest tenured current head coach in the National Hockey League, behind only John Cooper of the Tampa Bay Lightning, who I believe has 2 years on him on their current stretches. But, of all the storylines tonight, Horwat, before we send it over to our interview with Jesse Marshall, which was absolutely phenomenal, what is the one thing you're most looking forward to seeing tonight? It's been a while since the Penguins have played a game. What's the one thing you're looking for tonight?
Looking forward to a couple things. I'll keep them short, but definitely Puljujarvi, the possibility of Puljujarvi's return to the NHL. That's going to be something worth note because, again, like I said in the last little bit there, he's got that draft pedigree. He should still carry a pretty sizable namesake. So him returning to the NHL should be something to watch just in general. But also, my real answer is flipping to the Winnipeg Jets side. I kind of want to see how Shawn Monahan works for them in their system in with what they're trying to do. I think heading into this season, during the offseason, the Jets seemed sort of dead in the water. It didn't seem like they were going to get their Vezina winning goalie back. They weren't going to get one of their sharpshooters back. They kind of seemed like they were about to be a team driving toward a rebuild. And then what did they do? They doubled down on both of those guys. And then there they were at the top of the league for a little while. Sure, things have cooled off a bit since, but is Monahan going to be that boost that puts them right back into that position? And Monahan, anytime he's on a trade board, I consider what he could do with the Penguins lineup. So I think that's sort of where I'm looking at it as well, is just because, listen, the Penguins haven't had an outstanding over-the-top third-line center since, Nick Bonino was great, but he wasn't necessarily a Jordan Staal type.
Yeah.
So anytime at center hits the board, I always think of where they could land in the Penguins lineup in the third line role. So I'll be curious to see what Shawn Monahan can do. And that was a name that I always kind of wanted to see with the Penguins. So I'm curious to see what he can do with Winnipeg.
Yeah, I thought about it as soon as you mentioned that you were going to talk about Shawn Monahan. I was like, every time in Calgary, every time Shawn Monahan came up, you're like, man, I don't know, Nick. And I'd look at you and I'd be like, really? Again, with the Shawn Monahan love, listen, some people, they have their players. Yeah. Shawn Monahan is one of your players that you always keep an eye on. And anytime that comes up in external discourse, you always, flash your head over and say, well, Squirrel, where? Monahan, where?
Yeah. For what it's worth, Monahan's one. I was gonna say, Puljujarvi's been one for a while.
Always been one.
So that's a real exciting time for me tonight. Tyler Johnson was for a long time, and now he's just aged out.
Yeah.
That's an old one though. I can't think there was one more. I'm not remembering, but
I always used to have, when they both played for the Rangers, my two were Matt Zuccarello and Carl Hagelin, and one of them worked out very well for the Penguins, and hence the reason that I'm probably one of a very few Penguins, followers that have a Carl Hagelin jersey still hanging up in their closet. But
there's plenty around.
There's plenty, but how many people were actually getting the Carl Hagelin jersey? I don't know. But no, my thing for tonight is still Jake Guentzel. Obviously there's a lot of external coming around for Jake Guentzel. There's a lot of external noise for Jake Guentzel. He's handled it well to this point. He's performed just perfectly to this point of the season. How does that continue as we get closer to the trade deadline? Because the noise is only going to get louder. We saw it throughout the bye week. We saw it with the Nick Kypreos now proven to be false statement about his contract that he was offered by the Penguins. According to Josh Yohe, he hasn't been offered a contract by the Penguins yet. They've been talking, but he haven't offered anything as of yet. They're kind of just talking about the framework of a deal. So there's going to get a lot more noise. It's going to get a lot more noisy around Jake Guentzel. I'm interested to see how he handles that. And if he's able to say just business as he has been up to this point of the season, something tells me he will. Something tells me he's going to continue to perform just simply because that's what Jake Guentzel's done his entire career, 499 games to this point. Wouldn't be surprised if he goes out there and pots a goal or two in his 500th. But we're going to take a quick break. When we return, joined by Jesse Marshall of The Athletic, we talk about the power play, break down what that looks like, Erik Karlsson's performance through 46 games with the Penguins, and a Ryan Graves-Paul Martin comparison that should probably stop happening. We'll have all of that with Jesse after this break. Welcome back to the Tip of the Ice-Burgh podcast, brought to you as always by InsideThePenguins.com. We're joined now by freelance hockey writer for The Athletic and McKeen's Hockey. You can follow him on X at JMarshFOF. Jesse Marshall, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me back, gentlemen. Good to be here as always.
Very excited to have you back on. We obviously have plenty to talk about. The Penguins haven't, even though they haven't played in a week and a half, they've given us plenty to discuss and digest as the All-Star break and the bye week goes on. But I think we have to start with everybody's favorite topic, and that is 100% the 31st ranked power play in the National Hockey League. I mean, you've been very outspoken about what you think some of the issues are pertaining to this man advantage unit. What do you think is the main issue in your eyes with this current scheme?
Yeah, so I think if we think about like how penalty kills have changed since like Mike Sullivan came into the league, they've gotten significantly more aggressive.
Mm-hmm.
We hear the term like power kill thrown around all the time now, right? And penalty kills, I think they're forechecking now as aggressive or even maybe more aggressive than they do at 5-on-5. They're really decidedly trying to prevent zone entries, and we know the data around zone entries is rich, right? We know that zone entries with possession lead to a lot of scoring chances, especially on the power play. So teams want to shut that down, and they work on a timer. So when you get into the zone offensively, you're on the power play. The penalty kill generally will be waiting for a number of events to take place before they chill out. They count passes. They have a timer in their head. They give you 25 seconds free reign to keep forechecking. It depends on the team, but there's something that happens that shells them, right? That like gives them a little bit more of a passive look while still maintaining some of that aggressiveness. The Penguins system, right? This umbrella, right? I'm like, I can't even say it without regurgitating a little bit in my mouth. It lends itself to being bullied to the exterior of the ice, right? The umbrella is spread out. You've kind of got this, it is what it says, right? You've got somebody down front and somewhere around the front of the net, and then the spread of players on the top that you're trying to go cross ice with. That's the whole idea. You execute this motion, you get guys moving, it opens up these lanes. But in the face of these aggressive penalty kills, it just doesn't do any of that. It doesn't. And what you end up with is the entire power play gets bullied all the way out to the perimeter of the blue line. And that's where they spend the majority of their time. Their chances are generated from that spot. And I can prove this, by the way, by you go to hockeyviz.com. Mike is a great guy. Look at the shot map for the Penguins on the power play. The giant darkest blob of red they have is like, I don't know, 25, 30 feet away from the net. It's just up by the blue line. That's where they're taking their shots. And it's because they can't penetrate anywhere down low to the interior of the ice surface. There's not enough presence for them to win wall battles, to win individual one-on-one battles, to keep the puck down there. My suggestion this whole time is go 2-1-2, right? 2-1-2. You put two guys on each post, divide the offensive zone in half, put somebody as a floater in the middle. That's quite obviously Jake Guentzel. The most elusive player possibly in the National Hockey League in terms of scoring goals in traffic. You're not using him like that at all right now on the power play. And then I don't care who you put at the point. You could put you could put your grandmother at the point. That'd be fine with me. Like you now have the opportunity to triangulate lower in the offensive zone. You can pinch D in. It just gets so much easier to win wall battles down low when you aren't committed to having these presences in the high circle. So my problem is you could watch tape from 2016 to study for the Penguins power play tonight.
Yeah.
right? Like it can't be a hard prep job if you're another coach. So they got to throw it in the garbage and start all over again. And because to me, you could change personnel until you're blue in the face, but you're just rearranging chairs on the deck of the Titanic. Like you have a structural inefficiency that doesn't allow you to penetrate below the circles in high danger scoring areas. That sounds like a really big problem.
Yeah. So like hearing all that, it opened up my mind to like so many different like questions that just like have popped up into my head. I'll probably try and narrow it down to one if possible. But in this situation, like, does it feel like there's someone, whether it's a player or players or the coaching staff, to blame for this? And does that sort of mindset of you could study that film, that old film, you could still study, does that make teams like a little bit more aggressive against the Penguins at even strength, knowing that they have the penalty kill against them down pat?
I think it makes them more aggressive on the penalty kill. I think it gives them a almost carte blanche blank check. Remember how I was telling you, every coach that coaches a penalty kill unit is giving them some kind of cue, right? To like, okay, let's get structured. If you're playing box +1, you have X amount of events or time that can occur before you need to really go box +1. I don't think they turn that off for Pittsburgh. I don't know, like what's the point? I don't. If you structurally speaking, by virtue of the way you kill penalties, if you can keep them outside like that and you can disrupt their zone entries like that, I mean, let them go, right? You might accrue a few scoring chances of your own, in the process. So I think it does lend itself to penalty kills feeling like they have the ability to boss the Penguins around. And more often than not, the Penguins get bossed around. And if we have a shot heat map, what I would really love from player tracking is like a travel heat map. So like you could see where people are standing during a certain period, because I would love to see that data for the power play. It's just going to be a sea of red up from the circles up. Like there's just, so where does the blame lie? Like the players aren't going to like mutiny the coaches, right? And just come up with their own idea. But like for me, like if this belongs to Todd Reardon, I mean, I can't. What other answer can I don't want to throw the guy under the bus, but like if
he's considered the power play coach, and this is the power play.
This is where we're left with, right? And I haven't seen enough systematic changes, in zone systematic changes, like established possession. They've had set plays and stuff, and some have worked, but I don't think that we've seen like a wholesale change to like the actual place people are aligned on the ice.
You mentioned that you don't think personnel really would change much, if anything, whenever it comes to, flipping deck chairs on the Titanic, like you said. But it seems like whenever they put Puustinen and Chris Letang out there for those couple of opportunities right before the break, it seemed like something changed. It seemed like they were at least trying to work the puck down low. Do you think that that's a sustainable change where if you bring these guys in, they're going to work the puck lower, or do you think that they're still going to end up running that umbrella offense?
I think they'll still run it. The one thing you say about those scenarios is like Valtteri Puustinen's never met a shot on a power play that he didn't enjoy taking, right? So like and which you don't begrudge him for, because it's like that's what he's good at, right? Like so don't let your shooter shoot. But I think that shooting creates chaos, right? It inherently forces people to react and step outside of where their assigned area is. And it creates a numbers advantage for the power play. If the shot goes wide, it kicks into the corner or the boards, you can get a man number advantage in that puck battle, work it out, keep it alive, wash, rinse, repeat, shoot to your heart's content. So I don't think the Penguins' problem is that they're not shooting enough. I think that is a symptom of their larger problem, right? Their inability to generate like consistent scoring chances stems from where people are aligned and the fact that they can't. I think if you look at the goal of an umbrella, right? The utopian umbrella is the Penguins' version of it when James Neal was here, where he was a true presence in the middle, and you had a 40-goal scorer planted in the middle. That penalty kills had to commit resources to that. They had to. You could not let James Neal stand there uncontested, right? That was not going to work. And what that did was drove everybody lower, right? Who's that man now? I don't have the answer. I don't think you guys have the answer. There's no defined role. There's no one that's demanding that space in the slot. So you're looking for these cross ice plays, but you don't have anyone going through the middle to eat up, all that space or all those bodies to create those lanes. So they're not going to create themselves, right? That's just not the way it works. And I think you end up in this like stagnant thing where guys end up playing patty cake up, 10 feet, above the circle.
Now, I know, power play has been the biggest point of contention. I appreciate you breaking that down for us better than either of us could do on our own. That's why we bring you on. You're the master when it comes to that. But I do want to ask a little bit about Erik Karlsson when it comes to his overall play. His first year hasn't gone nearly as well as everybody had hoped or expected. What have you thought about his play at even strength? And obviously, both of us have said defensively, much better than we expected. It was a low bar, but he surpassed that. Offensively, though, and some of the responsibility aspect of the game, we've been a little disappointed in what he's shown. What have you seen from EK65?
I think he's been okay. 100 points wasn't going to happen on this team. That was an environmental reflection of San Jose's state at the time and how good of a player he was. And he had, I think a freedom there to, operate with sort of, again, a blank check and do whatever he wanted to do. And he was the only player over there who could do anything. So it didn't really make a difference anyway, right? Like, let him play whatever position he wants. I didn't think that he was going to get anywhere near that number here, but I'm surprised by how low the point total is trending. And I'm not surprised by his lack of impact on the power play, because for San Jose, like, he was not the architect or the who's the guy, the maestro. I don't know where I was going there. That was making the whole thing work, right? He was a trigger man. He'd shoot well. I think now, his role there has changed, but I'm not super surprised by that. The even strength is where I'm surprised it's not a bigger impact, because he's surrounded with much better forwards, right? No question about that.
Yeah.
Defensively, it's been what I think, again, fine. There's been moments where you watch me like, oh my goodness, that was bad. But you don't care. Like, I don't really care. That comes with the territory, right? So I'm not going to complain that my cat meows. So that's it. I think a lot of people are feeling left disappointed, but I think that's more of a reflection of, and this is not a shot at anyone, but if your expectation was like super high towards 100 points again, you're probably feeling kind of let down right now, right? Like, that's understandable, right? I think at the end of the day, here's what I think. You didn't need to do this, right?
Yeah.
Like, you didn't really, like, I don't feel like anything's drastically changed for the Penguins right now, like with this trade, and they're still in the same position that they were in last year. And frankly, that means I'm wrong, because I got on Twitter and said I thought that the Carlson lift would be enough for them to finish comfortably within a wild card spot. Comfortably is not the word I would use to describe the situation they're in right now. So I don't know, it's just it's one of those things that maybe maybe we were all a little bit chomping at the bit a little too hard here is I think. But again, I want to be clear. I think whether you look at it from video or analytics or whatever methodology you choose, he's not playing bad hockey. I want to be very clear.
No.
Nowhere near bad, not a problem even. Like, you can't even bring his name up as a problem. I think he's just not getting to the level that people like thought he would eventually ascend to.
And I think the other thing too is, and we talked about it, we tried to separate it there, obviously, but if the power play was going along at 19% and not a drastically 13.1, I don't think people would be highlighting, Erik Karlsson's play in total as much as they are. I want to ask you really quickly about his defense partner right now in Ryan Graves, because I have never heard Paul Martin's name invoked more than I have this season. And that goes back to when Paul Martin even played on the Penguins. Do you think it's a similar situation in total, or do you think people are just looking at that and saying, well, that's a defensive defenseman that struggled and then was better. This is a defensive defenseman who's struggling, so he should be better. Do you think there's similarities in their game, or is this just a different combination that people are trying to make that doesn't really fit what we're seeing from Ryan Graves?
To quote the great Cardinals coach Dennis Green, they are who we thought they were. No, these aren't comparable situations at all to me. Paul Martin had this like extended run of high level of success, right? Came here and then it went right back up, right? Ryan Graves, this is just who he is. Like, he's never been at the level Paul Martin was when the Penguins got him, right? Like I want to be very clear about that. Like, Paul Martin was much, much better of a defenseman. So, I think that the problem is that in this environment, right, in this specific environment Ryan Graves is in right now is not good for him, right? Because he's, no matter what, if he's in the top 6, he's paired with a guy who is going to demand the puck, control the breakout, and want to contribute offensively, which is all the things Ryan Graves wants to do. That's where he's at his most useful. So now his role has become Marcus Pettersson. He cannot do that. Just can't. I said this when he was signed. He's one of the least physical defensemen I've ever seen. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, because you'd say the same thing about like Erik Karlsson, right?
Yeah.
You'd say the same thing about a number of really talented defensemen. But think about that adjective, not physical, in relation to defensive defenseman role. Do those two things go together?
No.
Like, no. So I think it sticks out like a sore thumb that when you put him in the third pairing, his numbers go up through the roof. He looks the best he's ever looked when you limit his minutes and change his environment. You know, he's always been a guy who wants to get the puck across the blue line with possession and shoot it. That is his best. That is where he is at his best. And if you can find that role for him, he will thrive, and he will put up numbers that put him around the like probably 75th percentile of defensemen overall in the NHL. And you'll take that every time. But that's not where he is now. The results reflect that that's not where he is now. And I think at times defensively, the way he plays the game and what he's looking to do and where his mind is has put him sometimes, I think, as a passenger in these odd man break situations, right? Like he's not well suited to handle them. And I think that that's shown. So it's not a good fit. It's not a good fit for who they have him paired with. I think they've got to try to get his focus to be, you know, less on jumping the play, right? Be less involved on that direction. And you're going to have forward help. But work with the forward help. That's where your cue is, right? You need to be working off where the back check is and moving with the flow. That's all like coachable stuff, but you know, it's not what he's been doing for the last couple of years. So I'm not surprised necessarily that, you know, these have been the results given the environment he's in.
Yeah, and a lot of that forward help that you're discussing has been Sidney Crosby, who's having one of those seasons that I don't think anyone was expecting, even at the age of 36. But one thing that's popped up a lot more recently is this discussion of, again, him not finishing his career in Pittsburgh. Just genuinely, what have your thoughts been on that sort of topic? Is that something that could even slightly be in the cards? Or are we going to get the press release on July 1st about an extension?
Yeah, we're getting the parcel. Yeah.
No worries at all. No worries
Nothing
at all
to
from
worry
Jesse
about.
Marshall on that.
I'm actually, if you're asking for my percent concern level over that,
Yeah.
it is below 0.5. I don't know. Maybe he could retire. I don't know. Maybe shocks us all and walks away from the game or something like that. But like, I would remind people the state of the Penguins, like at both points of Lemieux's retirements and returns, they weren't competing for a Stanley Cup. They just weren't. Like they were good. They were a playoff team. They were a team that like got in and made some noise and almost went to the Stanley Cup final in 2000. But well, not almost. They went to the Eastern. I shouldn't say that. You lose in 5, it's not almost. But the point I'm trying to make is like nobody had that speculation about him, right? Like there was never the speculation of Mary's going to go play somewhere. Maybe there was, and I'm just too young to remember it. But I think people are bored, man. I think that's all it is. And people really want Sidney Crosby to play on their hockey team because they're looking at what he's doing at 36 years old, and they're thinking, if he could do that at 37, sign me up for 90 points. So, we're good.
I don't think Mario Lemieux had a MVP caliber hometown friend either that's playing on a rival team like Nathan McKinnon. But I mean, that helps the speculation.
True.
But Jesse, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate you giving us some time here. Obviously, it's going to be a very interesting month as the trade deadline looms in about 5 weeks from today, but we appreciate you coming on the show, sharing your insight on the power play, and hopefully some of these things that can get fixed, but appreciate you coming on and giving the time.
Go Pioneers.
Go Pioneers.
Yeah.